Which is mad
Okay.
because, like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thanks for the warning on that.
I was warning you for like 5 minutes beforehand. Are you ready?
That's okay. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm
Okay.
ready. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Hello, everyone. How are you today? Welcome to another day in Wonderland, or wherever we are. My name is Simon Scriver. I am one of the co-founders of Fundraising Everywhere, along with...
Hi, I'm Nikki Bell, also co-founder of Fundraising Everywhere, and welcome to our bonus live stream. So on Thursday, if you haven't heard already, we are running a 6-hour, 2-track virtual conference where all of the sessions have been specially curated to support you and your charity to get through the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, indeed. So we have our conference. It is free to register for it. If you go to fundraisingeverywhere.com/COVID-19, then you can register for free and you'll get all of the access to the live sessions on Thursday. We'll be sending you out joining details for those. And then there's like rakes and rakes of bonus stuff, sessions and bonus materials coming with it as well, which you'll all get access to just simply by registering at fundraisingeverywhere.com/COVID-19. But today, like yesterday, Nikki and I thought we would jump on, surprise, and do a stream of one of the sessions, a broadcast of one of the sessions. And so wherever you are watching this, give us a hello, give us a reply on Twitter or LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, wherever you are, say hello. But we hope you will be able to watch this session if you have some time now. It's a great session. Otherwise, you will get access to it once you register for Thursday as well. You'll be able to get it after the conference as well.
Yes, so on Thursday, the tracks that are running through the day are, so they're sessions made to help your charity find out what to do next. You know, how do you become digital? What should you do with supporters? So the resource library, which will be available to everyone who's registered at 6 p.m. on Thursday, they are sessions that have been curated to give you the tools and practical skills to actually be able to carry out that work. And this session is the one that's been submitted by Dan Fletcher from Kingston Fundraising and Management. And this session is around turning to trusts in a crisis. So there are lots of emergency grants that have been made available to the charity sector. Of course, funders are making changes. They're switching things up to help us work better with them. But obviously, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of charities that are in this space at the moment where they need help. So what Dan is going to do is going to support you to help you quickly develop amazing grants that can improve your chances of being successful with those applications.
And it's not just Dan. In fact, is also speaking with Emma Ullman, who's a senior consultant. So the two of them are presenting here on effective grant applications in this difficult time, in these strange times, and how we should be approaching those. Yes.
Yes, and Dan and Emma will both be live online at 2:30. So if you have any questions, just post them wherever you're viewing this, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and we'll pull those together so that when Dan and Emma join us at 2:30, we will ask those questions to them live and answer them right here, wherever you're watching it now.
So that's 2:30 UK and Irish time. So that's in about 30 minutes. They will be here live. If anyone wants to tweet us questions or put questions on LinkedIn or put questions wherever you want, just put them on and we'll keep an eye. And then we'll have a chat with them after this session. Yeah.
Yes. So anything over to Dan and over to Emma. No.
Here we go.
Dan Fletcher. Day about effective grant applications in the COVID-19 crisis. The influence of coronavirus has affected us all in many different ways, particularly in the way that we fundraise, and charities are having to think about making emergency grant applications in light of COVID-19. And for some charities, it may be a very new thing to do and they've never done it before. And so we're going to try and help you to navigate your way through that. As I said, my name's Dan and I work at Kingston Fundraising and Management, where I head up our fundraising consultancy. And I'm going to introduce you to Emma now, who's going to talk us through the next few slides. Emma works with me at Kingston. So over to you, Emma.
Thanks so much, Dan. Hi to everyone out there. As Dan mentioned, my name's Emma Ullman, and I work with Dan at More Kingston Smith. And I've actually been fundraising now for over 18 years. So I've worked on the ground fundraising and managed various different disciplines too. And it's really great to be here today to help, well, hopefully help everyone, given what's happened with COVID-19 and some of the opportunities out there to apply for grants and actually how you go about that if you're new to the area. So we'll be talking for around about 30 minutes and Dan and I will be co-presenting, and then we've got an opportunity for you to ask any questions of us. So please do write any questions that come to you while we're presenting, and we'd be really more than happy to answer them at the end of the session. So without further ado,
there should be a chat box that you can put some questions into, so just feel free to write away, and yeah, as Emma says, we'll deal with those at the end. Okay,
great. Thanks Dan for picking that up. Great. So if we could just have the next slide, Dan, that would be great.
Yeah. So
this is really the session overview, basically the agenda of what we're going to be going through in the next half an hour. So we're going to start with an introduction, just talking about the relevance of grant fundraising in the current situation with COVID-19. Then we'll be going through some of the basic principles to stand you in a good position to actually receive some funding. So talking about keeping your application simple and what you need to think about when you're doing that. Just talking about the criteria and how important and vital it is that you read the criteria, and we'll talk you through the steps that you'll need to think about with that. Thinking about using the funder's own words. Lots of grants out there, institutions will have their own language and their own terminology, and how you might want to think about mirroring that to stand you in the best chance of winning some funds. It's all about impact. We all know as fundraisers what we do. It's all about impact and demonstrating that, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Costing it up properly, and as I said at the beginning, if you've got any questions, we'll be able to answer those questions at the end of the session, and we've got the chat box going, as Dan mentioned as well, so please do add any questions in there, and then we'll tie everything up with a summary at the end. So thanks, that's brilliant. Dan, if we can just go to the next slide. So as an introduction, just wanted to talk about coronavirus and the deep impact it's having on charities. I'm sure we're all aware of this as fundraisers. It's I guess in some ways a perfect storm, because the deep impact is coming from the reduction of income for lots of charities that's happening because of the situation. So for example, in London where I live, one of the key fundraising events that was actually cancelled last weekend was an event called the London Landmarks, which is a big half marathon event which lots and lots of charities buy places for, and that event was cancelled last week. It doesn't look like another date will be put in the diary, so that's quite a big hole for lots of charities to fill, and how are they going to do that? Another example, I'm sure all of you out there will have heard of this, the London Marathon. That hasn't been cancelled, but that's been postponed, so potentially there's a massive gap of income for lots of charities within a certain time period. So again, that's going to present huge amounts of problems, and that's just two examples of lots and lots of activity out there that's just had to be cancelled just because of the situation, which leaves a huge gap in terms of fundraising for lots and lots of organisations. Deep impact also comes from costs. As I'm sure a lot of you appreciate, for lots of charities, the demand for their services has gone up, which means their costs are going up. So there's the income drop, but potentially there's an increase in costs. So it's really, really difficult for charities to survive at the moment. So for example, Dan and I at the moment are working with a client who's had to launch an emergency appeal because they work with some of the most sort of vulnerable people the coronavirus incident. So they're looking after the elderly community, some of the most vulnerable people that they really need to get to, and they've seen a huge surge in numbers that need their support. So they really need to generate more and more income, but at the same time they're looking at some of their fundraising income reducing. So that's just one example of lots and lots out there, which shows that charities are really struggling at the moment with income, but some of the demands of their services are going up. But the good news is that grant makers are stepping up to the crisis, and we have seen evidence of that. And what we are doing in this webinar, as well as showing you the tools of how you go about applying for a grant, we also want to give you some pointers to some grants that are actually become available as a result of the crisis. So that could be a really good opportunity for some of you out there to go and have a look after this webinar is finished, just to see if the criteria fits with your organisation, and it might be a great opportunity for you. So again, as I mentioned before, we are going to give you the tools of how to go about applying, and some do's and don'ts as well. So thank you, Dan. If we can go to the next slide. That's great. So as I mentioned just a second ago, here on this slide, hopefully this is useful for you. Some of these funders have recently announced that they will be supporting charities as a result of the crisis. So for the UK specific ones, you can see there, there's London Funders, so there's a really useful website there. Emergency funding, City Bridge Trust, John Lyons Charity, Bloomberg, and within those funders on their websites, they will describe what they're looking for and the specific criteria you need to adhere to. So I would encourage you to look at that. There's the National Emergencies Trusts, and there's also something there from on LinkedIn. So someone called Ian McClintock. Apologise, Ian, if you're listening to this and I've mispronounced your surname. I think that's how you say it. But he has produced a fantastic resource of various different organisations that are actively looking for charities to support given what's happened, and as far as I know, that's going to be kind of regularly updated, so please look to that as a resource. And for our US audience, there's a website there for various different funders that will potentially be helping your organisation. These slides will be shared at the end of the session, so please do look at these slides at your leisure afterwards. Don't worry too much about writing everything down there, but hopefully that will help you and give you, some place to start in terms of potential funders for your organisation. Thank you, Dan. Next one. Thank you. So, as I said at the beginning, I mean, a lot of this is common sense, but please do remember to keep your application simple. I think we're all guilty of being sort of quite internalized sometimes. So we all end up using jargon that becomes quite familiar to us, and we know what that means, and it's our language. But we have to always remember that someone that's brand new to your organisation isn't necessarily going to understand some of the language that you use internally. So make sure that you have that in the forefront of your mind when you're writing your applications. In fact, I think it's a really good idea to have someone look at the application that maybe doesn't know anything about your organisation before you submit it, because that's the same situation that a funder's potential funder is going to be in. They may not know anything about your organisation. So if you can get someone who is in the same situation, they'll be able to give you some really constructive feedback if things don't make sense, that as someone that's so internalised you might not kind of see very obviously. So I would definitely suggest that as a top tip. And remember that the people that you're writing to, they're just human beings at the end of the day. They're just people. So remember that when you're writing the application, and just keep it really simple and really easy to understand. And here we've just listed 4 kind of key questions to ask yourself when you are writing the application, just to keep in your mind, because these are the kind of things that funders going to be looking to for you to answer the questions to, really. So what are you trying? The first thing is, what are you trying to achieve? So, for example, as a result of the coronavirus, are you trying to help a brand new audience that's been affected by the situation? You know, it might be a new audience that's self-isolating. Who are you trying to get to? The second thing is, what's stopping you? What's stopping you get to those people at the moment? Is it the lack of income? Is it the lack of staff that you need to kind of be able to get this project up and running? Really think about that, and how the funder could potentially help with that. Next thing is, who or what will make the solution happen. So is it the funder through an injection of money, essentially, to enable this to happen? Is it a new employee that's going to start to enable this to happen? So really think about that idea. And last but not least, why do your beneficiaries need help? So what will life look like when and if the project that you're asking for funding happens, and what would life look like for the beneficiaries if nothing happens? So you're really demonstrating to the potential funders what difference you're going to make. That's really important. Dan, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Emma. So that's all very clear. And so the next few slides will sort of build on some of those points about keeping it simple and delve into those in a little bit more detail. Emma's already talked about the importance of reading criteria, and I think that's very true. That it's important to remember that trusts, grant-making trusts, are charities too. They are set up by law to spend their money in certain ways. And unless those ways, or those objects as they're known, are very broad, then that will limit how the trust can spend its money. So trusts try to make it easy for charities by sort of spelling out what it is that they do and how they do it. And it's important to read that information and to read it carefully and to understand it. Sometimes trusts will be focused on specific activities with their grant making round, so it's also important to be clear that the grant application that you're applying for may be in a very limited area. At the moment, there are charities, trusts that are setting up grants that are specifically for the charitable sector to cope with COVID-19 and the impact on its beneficiaries. So you need to be very clear, excuse me, that the money, what money is available, and how the charity is going to use it. And you need to be sure that the way that you're asking for that money is applicable or does confer with the criteria. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and you're wasting the time of the trust in terms of them having to read an application that will turn out to be ineligible. It's also very important to look at the questions that are being asked if you're filling in an application form. Often these questions seem to repeat themselves, but actually they're not repeating themselves. They're just trying to draw out specific details of your charity's activity. So it's really important that you look at those questions and that you tell the trust about the work that you're doing in how it responds to those actual questions, rather than just going and telling the trust everything you think it should know about your organisation, because it isn't actually asking that question, it's asking something specific. It's also a cardinal crime to just cut and paste answers from one application form to another, and it may be that you think one question is the same as another question in another application form, but probably they aren't, and you need to bespoke your answers to each form just to ensure that you're responding to what it is that they're asking for and how they're asking it. It can be helpful to check other grant recipients that the charity is given to also make sure that you're the same sort of charity that they tend to give to, that you do the sorts of things that they're interested in. Their annual accounts might be a place where you can find out who they've given to before. Have a look at those, have a look at the way they've given, what organisations they've given to, how much they've given, and that will give you a clue to their giving patterns and whether you're fitting in with that or not. And as Emma said, it can be really helpful to get somebody else to give a second opinion of what you're doing. It's very easy to look at a grant grant criteria and imagine that your organisation is just a perfect fit, and that it would be ideal for them to give you that money, but actually you're just thinking about the fact that your charity needs the money and it's an attractive source of funding. You're not thinking about whether your organisation is really the right kind of recipient for that grant maker. A second opinion will be able to help you to ground that in reality, and we'll see some of the flaws in some applications and help you to be sure that you're applying for the right thing. The next thing that we want to look at is the importance of using the funder's own words. Also, as Emma said, the charity world is full of acronyms and jargon, and as many other communities are. And we use this jargon all the time, and we can forget what it sounds like to others outside of our organisation. Often it's quite hard to navigate the words that we use if you're not within the organisation. And so writing applications need to be clear and concise, and to avoid jargon as much as possible. Avoid the acronyms, avoid the words which you use that other people don't use in everyday language. I've heard some recommendations that actually sentences that you're writing in applications should be no longer than 16 or 17 words. So there's a real discipline there to try and keep your sentences short, and to make sure that they hit a punch and that they don't run on and on and on with lots of subclauses, making it hard to follow what it is that you're saying. I've also heard that if you're writing in English, it's better to use words which are of an Anglo-Saxon origin rather than of a sort of Norman or Romance French sort of origin. So you use the word use instead of facilitate, or make better use, or make something better rather, instead of improve. I don't know completely the science behind that, but there seems to be something that the words that come from sort of the more the original Anglo-Saxon or Germanic origin are just easier for our heads to understand, and we don't get lost so much with that kind of wording. So those are some tricks that you might be able to try and apply, and that does help you to think closely about the length of sentences and whether you're really getting a punch with what you're saying. But most important, it's important to look at how the funder expresses themselves in their own written materials, and to use those to influence you and to help you to think about how you reflect back to them what it is that you're doing, and to show them that you're understanding what you're talking about, but in their own language, and that it fits the work that you do. So their language shows what they're interested in. It shows them what they prioritize. And then that helps you to prioritize those things too in what you're saying. So I'm not suggesting that you put things in your application that aren't true and consistent with what your organization does, but if you can phrase those in the same words as the funder, then that will make it easier for them to process your application, because they'll have a framework to do so. So one example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, huge global foundation, they say on their homepage, in developing countries, we focus on improving people's health and well-being, helping individuals lift themselves out of hunger and extreme poverty. In the US, we seek to ensure all people, and especially those with fewest resources, can access opportunities they need and succeed in school and life. So there's some strong clues there into what they prioritize, and also how you talk about it. So if your organization does improve people's health and well-being, if you can think about your organization and say that it does truly lift individuals out of hunger and extreme poverty, if you work globally, then talk about the things that you do in those sorts of terms. Lifting somebody out of hunger and extreme poverty is a form of jargon. It is a specific way of saying things, but it's their way of saying things at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so if you're going to apply to them, talk in those terms as well. And if you're looking for US funding from them, then you can talk about people with the fewest resources, not people who are poor, but people who are with the fewest resources, and think about, well, what does that mean? What are those fewest resources that they have, and are those our beneficiaries? And how do we know that, and how can we express that to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? So do the things in their words and phrases, but also don't use gibberish. Don't talk nonsense in your applications. And this next paragraph, or this next slide, shows a paragraph that I'll read out. We are seeking support to further our mission to develop interdependence in young people with challenging cognitive differentiation. We recognise that every young person is different, so that while one young person may join us at entry point 1 and find themselves capable of progressing to phase 3 after 18 months, another young person may require more time engaging with us at phase 2 before feeling capable of progressing further. Funding will be used to utilise differential opportunities to develop confidence and realign their cognitive focus. Now, that may mean something to somebody who's written that. It may mean something within an organisation, but for many people, that's just jargon and gibberish, and it doesn't really help a funder to understand where their funding might be used or how it might make a difference. The sentences were really quite long. There were lots of sub-clauses, lots of words which need a little bit of explanation of they're not general words that everybody uses. So make it easy for the grant makers to understand what it is that they're giving to, and make sure that what you write is well written and easy to understand. So I want to finish up with two more tips which are a bit more technical, a bit more practical in content. The first of them is around impact, and impact is a word that lots of charities talk about, lots of funders talk about. It is important for organisations to really understand their impact and to get that right. But what does that mean in a crisis? Even in a crisis, funders won't want to be pouring their money away without making sure that it makes an impact. They want to be sure that the money that they might be giving to you is going to make a difference, and that you understand how that difference is going to happen. They want their grants to make a difference. That's their charitable objects. Make sure that they have to do that. So how do you go about that? Firstly, you need to really understand what your theory of change is, or theories of changes. So what changes as a result of your work? What difference happens? And as a result of COVID-19, there may be changes to how you are working and what's going on. So you maybe need to go back to basics. You need to think about what are the outputs that you're delivering, what actually happens as a result of the activities that you want to seek funding for, and then what happens as a result of that. What are those changes or outcomes to the people, generally people who are benefiting from those outputs? And then think about the wider impact. What happens to society as a result of what you're working on? So Emma talks a bit about some work we're doing with a charity that's working with older people. For them, they're now unable to do some of the things that they used to do before the coronavirus hit. Because of social isolation, they're not able to organise groups for older people. They're not able to get them together in community spaces, and then it's even harder for staff in this charity to go to the older people's homes and to help them there, because those older people are vulnerable and they should be socially isolated. They shouldn't be meeting lots of people who might be carriers of COVID-19. So instead, they're phoning and doing video calls in order to help people and to maintain contact and to find out what needs the older people have. So what happens as a result of the calls that they're making? We need to think that through, and that's the kind of thing which we then need to talk about in terms of impact. So the calls are the outputs, but what are the outcomes from those calls? It might be that as a result of a call, the person making the call is able to arrange for food or medicine to be delivered to that older person, because that older person has been able to express that they have a need. They're not able to get out. They're running short of food. Some of the people that this charity's spoken to are down to the last food. They're likely to go to bed hungry because they have nothing left, or they might be in dire need of medicines because their prescriptions have run out, and they don't have anybody to call on to be able to help them to get those vital resources. So then, what are the wider impacts of that? There's wider impacts in terms of people's health. When medicines are delivered, then they're going to remain healthy. They're not going to be at risk of needing wider health and social care services. There's going to be improvements to their mental health, so they're going to be relieved. They're not going to progress into depression or worse aspects of poor mental health. And so you can talk about the outputs, you can talk about the outcomes, and then you can think about the wider impact of making those phone calls and why those are important. And it's also important to continue to listen to stakeholders and to use the information that they provide in order to describe your impacts, and put that in your applications. And think about things that you can measure, think about questions that you can ask your beneficiaries, maybe 2 or 3 simple things on a call. You're like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling? That's something that could be easily asked and easily measured. And then you can also use that in your application to demonstrate the difference that you're making, particularly if you can see that difference changing over time. And so lastly, I want to think about costing things up properly. We find that talking to charities, they often underestimate the amount of money they need to spend in grant applications, maybe by up to 20%. So they're asking for funding, but they're not asking for enough. And when they get the grant, they have to spend the grant on the thing that they've asked for, but there's a shortfall, and that shortfall needs to be funded from other sources. And now is a time when charities are lacking reserves, and they need to spend those reserves on all sorts of things. Those other sources that can crop up, the shortfall won't necessarily be there. So it's really important that you know and understand your true costs, that you think about those carefully, and that you present those transparently. And I think as well, at this time of coronavirus, trusts are becoming more aware of the need to fund core activities, the importance of funding the core things that charities are doing, and they recognise that charities that are asking for that funding as well will be the ones that are acting responsibly, and that it's fair that they should ask for that core income. So don't be afraid to talk about core costs. Make sure that you present those in a way that is accurate, that you think about apportioning the general costs of your organisation across all of your activities, not just the distinct project costs that can be itemised and are easy to present. And part of that may mean that you need to stay in closer contact with your finance teams, which may be hard because you may be distant from them. But it's important that you do learn the language of finance, and you work closely with them in order to be clear on what the costs are, and what it is that you're asking for, and how you can divvy that up for different applications and different pieces of funding. So get your numbers right, make sure that your numbers add up. That's the other thing that funders often say, that in a budget, if the budget doesn't actually add up properly, then it makes them worry about the words. So the words correct. Do they describe what the charity is actually doing, and are they doing that properly? Make sure that your numbers add up properly and are watertight, and fit the kind of organisation that you are, and the sort of information that's presented in your annual accounts as well, because grant makers will often check your annual accounts to do their due diligence on you as an organisation, to make sure that you are who you say you are, and that you should be funded. So those are the main tips that we've got, and we're going to go now to a period of question and answers, and we hope that you'll have some questions, and that we'll be able to help you with some helpful answers to that as well. So thanks very much, and I look forward to speaking to you with some Q&A.
Hello, how's everyone doing? So that was a good session, Nikki.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks, Dan and Emma. It was uplifting to know that there are kind of no major changes, and from what a lot of great trust fundraisers are doing at the moment, which I guess for a lot of people is comforting, isn't it? Because when you're in the middle of a pandemic and everything is changing on a daily basis, and to know that what you're already good at, the networks and contacts that you already have, and the way that you do things is still adequate, but just refocused, I guess that can instill a lot of confidence in people. I really like the insight about the language. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think I mean, they had some really good tips in there, because it's like, it's tempting, if you read the negative news, or you get caught up in the negativity, it feels like funding is gone. It feels like everyone's just pulling it. These foundations can't support us anymore, and things like that. So it's nice to hear two calm people kind of talk through that. Actually, you know, there's opportunities here, or you know, we can keep in control of some of it by just having these conversations with our funders and being very human about it, being very open about it. So I appreciated that.
Yes, that human and that authenticity is something that I think people are realizing. I think in the sector, there's this kind of desire to always have the answers. And I think what stalled a lot of us last week is that no one really knew what the right way to proceed was. We had a lot of people stopping fundraising, a lot of ads being taken down just because of the panic of, what do we do? But from the fundraisers and the charities that I've been speaking to, they've said that once they've had that vulnerability and that authenticity with people and saying, you know, we're getting through this, this is what we're up to, we don't have all the answers right now, but, you know, we're working with the best people to get them, they've actually found that that's had a much better response than, you know, going to ground and not communicating anything. So that's really cool. So we should probably hand it over now to the speakers. So Dan is in the waiting room. So hi, Dan, we can see you there. So we're about to add you now to the live screen. So there he is. Welcome, Dan.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi.
Good, thanks. Hopefully Emma will be joining soon as well.
Yeah,
great.
Right. How are you getting on? Are you surviving? You're managing through all of this?
Yes. Yeah. So just switching. I had you coming through my ears in two different ways then.
So much of us. I do want to point out, first of all, just to say a huge thank you to you, Dan and Emma. So Dan and Emma, I think, got a request on, was it Friday?
Friday,
to be involved with the conference. So for you both to pull that session together and be here live today is much appreciated. And that's, you know, for a lot of the speakers who are involved in Thursday's conference, everyone's literally been working on it the past four or 5 days. So really, really appreciate that bit. So thank you. How have you found it working with charities? What was the initial reaction like compared to what the work that they're doing now?
I think you've been talking about last week being a week of adjustment and sort of getting our heads in completely different places, or working out how to move our heads into completely different places, and that's what I've been experiencing. Charities thinking about doing emergency appeals when they've never done anything like that before. That's something which has been an interesting process to go through with some of our clients. I talked about, or Emma and I talked about one of our clients working with older people, and they've had to not only completely reconfigure the way they provide services, but they've had to recognize that their funding that's coming in has to come in different ways now as well. So they're having to rely on public funding when maybe they haven't done that in the past. So it's a lot of adapting. And I guess in some ways we've all sort of adapted quite quickly to talking to lots of people from our living rooms or from our bedrooms or wherever, and not having to get up in the morning and put your work clothes on, but just to roll out of bed and start straight away. But at a more fundamental level, the bigger adjustments with how charities are working, and I suppose it's also not knowing where this is going to go. You know, what's going to happen in 3 months' time, what's going to happen in 6 months' time. We never know exactly what the future is going to hold, but now there's so much uncertainty. It's hard to know how to prepare for something now, which when you don't know what it's going to be like later on. I was talking to another charity this morning, and they don't know whether they'll still be in existence in 6 months' time if they don't get enough funding in this short, the next 3 months or so. Then that would be really tricky for them. So do they try to develop relationships with grant making trusts, for example, and offering them things that they're doing over the next 6 months, and then realize that actually they can't do that, do they? They can't proceed in that way. So it's also getting charities to, the emergency appeal for here and now is easy to make. The appeal to how to ask for funds in 6 months' time is trickier, but not impossible, but trickier.
What about the grant making organizations themselves, like the foundations and these organizations? A lot of them are obviously going to take a hit in their, I suppose, financial investments or wherever they get their funding from. What's your feeling for the future for them? Not just the charities, but the people who are funding us. Are they even going to be around in 6 months? Some of them.
So yeah, I think they will be around. I think grant making trusts are by nature more resilient than the charities that they fund. Yes, those which are have endowments and who are sort of reliant on investments have had a huge hit, 30% or so taken out of their reserves, perhaps.
Wow.
That's going to make it harder for them, but it's happened before, 2008, 2009, when there was a crash at that point, the housing crisis in the US and then hit globally. That was the same sort of, or maybe not quite at the magnitude, but it was a pretty large hit to many trust funds, and they did manage to bounce back. They adjusted their processes. They gave out maybe slightly less funding. Maybe not in the immediate aftermath, but over the sort of following years, and then they built up again. So what I'm seeing is actually a lot of responsiveness, a lot of being responsible with the funds, and a lot of people in the trust world talking about the fact that their job is to give away money to help their beneficiaries, and they can't. The only way they can do their job and fulfill their objectives is by giving that money away to charities who do the work. The trusts don't do the work, but their money is there, held in trust for it to do something good.
Sure.
So I just had a message from Emma to say she's trying to get online, but she can't seem to get in. I'm not sure. She was on the Google Hangouts, so I don't know whether that was.
Has she got? Okay, yeah, she needs. It's the link.
Yeah. The link that I've sent. The StreamYard link. Hopefully she can click on that one as well. But I was going to say those trusts sort of are recognizing that without the charities out there, then they can't do their job properly either. So they've got to be responsible. They've got to step up, and they've got to help charities survive. Otherwise, they also won't have a purpose in the future if there aren't charities out there for them to give money away to. It is a symbiotic relationship.
Sure.
So what happens then? Because they were in the same position last week. So I know of a lot of organisations who've applied for maybe like first rounds of funding, and then that's being postponed to the autumn. And I think again that's just because we didn't know what was happening. Some of them were a bit slow to kind of pivot to digital. So what now can they do to help charities? Because if they exist to award the funds and the charities need it now, even though they've made that initial decision, how can we actually work forward and say, we got that wrong, let's do it this way instead?
Sure. So not every trust is able to sort of pivot as quickly as we'd like them to. I guess there is that reality. But there are some that are definitely recognizing the importance to do that, and are either, I guess what's happening is that a number of trusts are focusing their grant making now on COVID related causes, which helps some charities, not all charities. So that's good for some charities, less good for others. Trusts that have existing grants in place are telling their recipients that they can go on a 3-month or maybe a longer holiday in terms of having to live up to their grant expectations. So that does help some charities, but it is just a short-term fix, just to plaster over the wound, I guess. Other charities are sort of looking at what ways that they can make things work in terms of sorry, Nikki, you just sent me a link. Then is that for?
Oh, that's for Emma.
For Emma to get in. Okay, yeah. Let me just.
Yeah, you're right. Do you want to? I might just say hello to. There's a few people watching this. Elvis in Cameroon is watching this, and Elvis has a question, which we'll come back to in a second. And there's a few other people commenting, like Mary Moorish, Laura. Hello, Laura. Yeah, a few people watching this in different places. But Elvis is asking, I mean, he's asking specifically about African funding, but I suppose more general around the world. His question is a good one, is if you know, looking beyond existing relationships, how are we fixed for finding new relationships right now, you know, in terms of identifying new funders and applying to grants for first time? Is this something that's pretty unrealistic for the next few weeks or months even, or should it still be business as usual in researching, identifying and applying?
So I would definitely encourage organisations to do that research, to look and to apply and to try new things. Yeah, we're in. Everybody keeps saying it's sort of unprecedented times. It's almost becoming cliche now, but we are, and funders recognise that. They recognise that there's needs that they maybe didn't know about beforehand, or hadn't approached them before. And the impact of COVID-19 is affecting charities in different ways. Charities that haven't necessarily had to talk to or to approach grant making trusts now may need to do that. So yeah, a number of the things that in my presentation just then was helping organizations who haven't thought about the whole trust fundraising world. What can they do? How can they get in? How can they approach the grant making trusts, and what tips do they need to know in order to do that? So yeah, look them up. There may be some new bits of new funding coming on stream as well. I think you know, Martin Lewis in the UK, I know it's UK based, but he has been giving funding away through a trust, but at a different scale to what he's immediately responded to last week with the COVID crisis. Other philanthropists are stepping up as well in different ways. So there will be new bits of funding out there as more individuals recognise that they need to respond, and some of them will do that through the trust, grant making trust process. Or that makes the most sense to do so.
Yeah, very good. I believe Emma has arrived backstage, so we're going to bring Emma to front a house as well.
In the green room, is she?
Yeah.
She's in the green room. Yeah, she's mingling. She's mingling with Bono and Meatloaf and everyone else. How are you, Emma? How are you getting on?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
Technical difficulties, but yeah. So I'm here.
The internet is a maze sometimes. And you're locked in. You're managing all right. Are you going stir crazy, or are you okay?
Okay. I've got 2 young children who are sort of keeping me busy. So my husband and I are sort of tag teaming childcare and working. So so yeah, but all good, and we're healthy and well. That's the main thing. Good
to hear.
If I mute myself and do this, that's what I'm doing. I'm just
you've got a small child as well.
Yeah, I think that's become generally accepted now, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
You just sometimes have to run off and help a kid. Emma, I might actually ask you, because Dan mentioned about like Martin Fletcher's fund and other funding that's appearing, and especially the new funding seems to be moving quite quickly. Like Martin Lewis's, I think he'd announced it, applications, decisions, you know, money already being dispersed now. So I'm just curious how we as charities adapt to that if we're going to start seeing decisions and things moving much quicker. Charities sometimes, you know, are can be quite slow, especially if boards are only meeting every 3 months normally. Now this might be slowing things down even more. How do we stay as fast as the funders?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to almost sort of keep abreast with everything that's coming up. So making sure that you kind of are linked into all of the kind of the main charity networks that will tell you about where all this funding's coming from. I think that's going to be sort of really important. And almost, I would say, have those conversations with trustees in advance. So almost preempt that decision before you need to make those decisions in a way. So don't wait for the opportunity to come. Be having those decisions with them now, so that as and when the opportunity comes along, you've almost already got the sign off. So I would suggest you be having those conversations now. But yeah, there's like so many websites out there now that will tell you about all of these trust options. I think within the presentation we relayed some of those opportunities, but there'll be more and more that come out as the weeks go by. So it's just making sure that you're I guess looking externally out from your organisation at some of those opportunities, not just looking at sort of the internal decisions you need to make, but actually what else is out there. That's really important.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great idea in terms of getting prepared beforehand, or getting almost like the theoretical sign off from trustees, so that you can move a bit nimbler. And then, keeping an eye on what places like Institute of Fundraising and Akivo and AFP in America, places who maybe announce funding that comes up, and keeping an eye on their social stuff.
And that will be really current as well.
And the link that we put in, the information that Ian McClintock's putting up on LinkedIn, and we included a link in our presentation. That's great. He's with Charity Excellence Framework, and he's doing some great research out there, which and lots of resources which people should tap into. I think that's not just for people in the UK, but globally. That's good stuff out there. So, but there are other people who are providing resources, and so we've just got to learn to work a little bit differently.
Yeah,
I mean the good news is there are opportunities out there. Like funders are responding to this as well. So there are lots of positives out there, given the situation, and opportunities for charities too.
Good. On that note, though, around working differently and acting faster, so I know of 2 more charities who, as of Friday, are furloughing their staff. So how then realistically can we keep up with this if there's no, and I know this is a government issue that massively needs to get sorted out, so definitely get behind the petitions and calls for help for that. But what can charities do in the meantime if they're trying to do all of these things, keep the work going? They have all of these changing rules and masses of resources that they can, apply to and get help from. Realistically, how can they make it focused and prioritize it in the right way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we put on a slide, which I think maybe hasn't yet come up, is that now might be an opportunity to use, or for charity staff to flex themselves in terms of how they work. So it could be that for example, with service delivery staff, that some of them aren't being furloughed because there's work for them to do, but some of the work that they do might have to move into the realm of being a trust fundraiser or writing trust applications, because they may be individuals who can write, and they know sort of from the coalface what they're doing as an organization. So it may be that you actually need to look at your staff and the individuals, and not necessarily be completely flex a little bit on their job titles and what they need to do in the short term, just to keep things going. And the furloughing thing is until the end of May at the moment, so it is also only a 2-month window. It may need to continue. It may be that that sort of 2-month break is enough of a reprieve for charities. I think right as we speak in the UK, the DCMS government committee is talking to charity leaders like Carl Wilding and others about some support for the charity world here. So yeah, it could be that over the next 2 months things get sorted out in a way that then furloughed staff are able to slot back in and carry on. But others will have taken up the mantle in the interim.
Yeah. Thank you.
In terms of people listening, we're conscious about keeping you for too long, but for people who are watching this on any of the social media, or maybe watching this back in the downloads, what would you feel like is a priority for people right now? I mean, obviously, it's different for every organization. You've talked a lot about communicating with funders and things like that. Is that your priority? Is just open the lines of communication, or is there anything else really practical we can be doing straight away?
Emma?
I think one of the key things is almost kind of looking at your case for support and maybe redefining it given the current situation. You know, what differences are you making that can kind of demonstrate that you need funding now? I think that's really important because we're in a different situation than we were sort of 2 weeks ago. So for me, that would be a key priority.
Makes sense. Dan?
And I think it's an old maxim that if you don't ask, you don't get. But now's the time. If you, as a charity, you've never been particularly strong on the asking, and if you've never put your case for support and the funding gap that you have, if you've never been too open about that with the public, maybe you've had funding streams that have been reasonably reliable, and you haven't needed to go full out on explaining why people need to give to you. Now's the time to be open, to say yes, we need help, and if you don't ask, you don't get, but if you do ask, there's a good chance you do get. So yeah, that would be my priority. Ask and keep asking.
Yeah, good advice, because I think some people are afraid of asking at the moment because they feel they're not in the COVID-19 category. But I mean, I think, like you talked around, Dan, most organizations, if not all organizations, are affected by this, and so there is a license to ask, I would say, for most charities out there. So find that confidence.
And what's the worst that could happen? Somebody says no. Then you just ask somebody else. Just keep going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the opportunity part, so that's covered it nicely. So thank you. And just thank you again. I know you both pulled this together very quickly. And it's much appreciated by us, and I know it will be hugely appreciated by anybody who has been watching today, but also who will access the resources on Thursday as well. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
You're welcome. And it's something more Kingston Smith, we're very pleased to be able to provide support to the charity sector, and we're going to be doing a series of webinars like this ourselves as well, which are free, and anyone can tune into them, so they can look out for them on our website.
What's your website?
Just mks.co.uk.
Awesome. There you go.
And what does MKS stand for?
More Kingston Smith. Sorry, Simon.
That makes a lot of sense. All right. Okay. Will you be there on Thursday? Are you going to find time to pop into the?
Yeah. I just had an email through from you with the details, so I'm looking forward to listening in on Thursday afternoon. Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Well, we'll see you on Thursday. Thanks a million, Dan. Thank you very much, Emma. Really appreciate you making the time for this. And
okay.
Cool.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
Okay. Bye now. Bye.
Well, Nikki, there you go.
They were great. That was really good.
Lovely.
I've been so impressed by how quickly people have pulled stuff together, but also how great it is as well. So yeah, really appreciated from those two. And good luck with the rest of the webinars and everything that you're putting on as well. Definitely go check out their site.
Yeah.
So from us on Thursday, as you will have heard, we are running a virtual global summit, which has been curated especially to support the charity sector through the COVID-19 pandemic. We have 2 tracks and 6 hours of content being streamed live on Thursday. And then at 6 p.m, all of the sessions plus the bonus resource library in which that session will feature will be sent to everybody. And you can watch it all back in your own time, whenever you can, whenever you need to. And we're going to keep it on the Fundraising Everywhere website for as long as this continues, just so it's a living resource that you can go back and dip into. Some of the other sessions that we have on Thursday, we have setting up a response task force, working with your board to cope in crisis, turning cancelled events into digital events and utilising social media. We have lots of things on digital. There's a track dedicated just to digital for anyone that's wondering how they can do that at this moment. But we also have sessions on wellbeing, time management, using the telephone, everything that we've thought that you might be finding a challenge at the moment, it is there, and there it is on the screen. So that's the live event on Thursday, and it's all free. And we want to say a big thank you as well to the conference partners. So of course Salesforce have partnered with us to make it possible, and also thanks to Resource Alliance, Institute of Fundraising, Fundraising Association Austria, the European Fundraising Association, Charity Digital, Charity Comms, Michelle Flynn Coaching, and the International Face-to-Face Fundraising Congress for contributing a session as well.
It's awesome to see so many of the organizations come together, just like no questions asked. They just got stuff ready and just wanted to push it out and share it out. It's lovely.
Yeah, well, it's for the purpose of the fundraiser, isn't it? Like,
oh, I know. Well, sure.
It's
just a very generous sector to start off with.
Doesn't matter who does it. Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah. All right. So yeah, as Nikki said, that full schedule is up now at fundraisingeverywhere.com/COVID-19. You can see the full schedule. You can see the speaker lineup, and you can see all the downloads that are going to be made available for all registered attendees. There's a lot of downloads. Laura downloads.
It was either a lot of downloads or like 6 tracks.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah, you're right.
do that. Right. And on Thursday as well, it's going to be totally interactive. So we will both be there. Good coughing into the elbow. Wow.
Do you like that? And I'm muted as well. I'm getting really good.
Thank you. So we'll be live hosting on Thursday. We'll be taking a track each. We will be there live. The speakers will be running their sessions and also there on a live Q&A, much like Dan and Emma were. But you can also network with each other. So on the conference page, there's a networking box. You can talk to each other. You can video chat each other. We've got breakout rooms if you get sick of us and just want to go speak to people elsewhere. So the whole thing about Fundraising Everywhere is that it's an experience. You actually get to be part of it instead of just sitting at home and us talking to you just like this. So we're really looking forward to bringing that to you on Thursday. So do register for free, and we'll have more expert tips to share with you there.
Yeah, I think that's really important because at this event there's going to be Q&A, and a lot of the speakers are going to be present in the chat box. So it means that you can bring in very specific, very personal questions about your own circumstances and your own organization and get really tailored answers from the experts. So the recordings are all available, and that's great and everything. But the live session is good because you get direct access to the speakers and can ask them questions. So really recommend you try and join us on Thursday.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for those that joined us this afternoon.
You're welcome.
We have another session streaming tomorrow. We'll tell you what that is tomorrow when we've decided what it is, because we haven't yet. So yeah, that'll be another surprise tomorrow. But we're just going to keep it going through this week. So thank you very much, and do get in touch with Dan and the team on their website and also on Twitter. So if you go to @FundEverywhere, I've just been sharing Dan's details and website
nice
there, so go check it out.
Good job. Cool.
Thanks.
All right. Well, that's it. It's nice to check in with it, right? I think every day it's nice to just be like, hi.
But I have a 4-year-old just watching Peppa Pig, so we're going to go out on the bike now for our daily allowed out of the house thing. He to be fair, I'm glad it's Peppa Pig because he's going through an obsession with air raid sirens at the moment, which is just wonderfully timed. So he just sits and watches like 20 minutes of air raid sirens on YouTube. And
really,
Peppa, he likes these. What's whose name?
No, that's insane. I said.
Oh, I guess I said what's his name. He likes to know how they work. He's got like a very mechanical. I can see what you're getting up there on the other screen. Don't bring Peppa Pig on screen.
Nah.
Get done for copyright. Don't do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So no, he just sits and we watch these videos where they take them apart. But there's a air raid siren in the Forth in Scotland that he really wants to go and see because they still use that. So that's something to look forward to after lockdown.
Yeah, a nice relaxing trip to air raid sirens.
Yay.
That's crazy. But anyway, we're cutting live now to Daddy Pig, who has some stuff.
Good grief. Okay.
It's my little brother George. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
We'll definitely see everyone on Thursday. Thanks so much.
See you, Nikki. See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.